Hi everyone, Stephen here at Teach Me Music, and today we're going to be talking about the top 10 2020 bass lines. So when I say top 10, I basically mean my top 10. So these are going to be for different reasons. All the songs have a kind of particular reason why I've picked them. It might be because the bass line is catchy, it might be because it's really difficult to play, it might be because it's really groovy, or it might be because you can actually learn something really useful from it. So just because they're easy or easier doesn't necessarily mean that's why they're, not worthy of being in the top 10. It's always about, multiple different reasons as to why we pick these bass lines. So sometimes simple is good, sometimes complex is good. So we're going to start obviously with number 1, and I'm going to break them down, play them for you a few times, and then we do have obviously a PDF and everything where you can actually learn them yourself. So I'm not going to go into depth into every single song because that's going to take forever. So we're just going to go through the top 10. I'm going to play them, break them down for you just in a little bit of detail, and then we're all good. So song number 1 is Cotton Candy by YUNGBLUD. This is a really, really catchy bass line. It's not super complex, but once again, doesn't matter. It sounds killer, it's awesome, and the song is actually really popular as well. And it's from 2020, so it's number 1 on this list today. And just to give you a little bit of insight, what happens is you play the root note of the chord, and it's got a nice little kind of high-end melody on it. So it sounds like this. So the first 2 notes that I'm playing, that's kind of your typical chord, your root note. And then you've got the, which makes it sound a little bit more like a lead instrument, which is why it's really cool. And on the track, it stands out a lot. It's really, really funky. It's got a nice groove and a nice bounce to it. So obviously that's why it's on the top 10 list. So I'm going to play this bass line for you now just a few times so you can see it. Check out the PDF and check out the tab and notation, and obviously you can learn it too. So best thing about this is it's quite a simple, catchy bass line. So it shows you that you can do quite a lot with not a lot of notes and not a lot of detail. So there's only 3 chords, and it really, really does kind of catch your attention, and you don't have to put loads of technique into it, which is perfect. You might notice that the reason why it's really catchy is because it does this a lot. And even though there's variation, it obviously sticks in your head a lot. So the first time we play it, we do, then at the end of the second time, we do this. So there is a little bit of variation in the bass line, grabs your attention, and it's just enough to kind of make you pay attention to it. Really, really cool. So that is Cotton Candy by YUNGBLUD, and that's number 1. Number 2 on our list is Levitating by DURAS. So this one gets a little bit more complicated, and the reason why is because it's slapped and it's got muting in it as well. So this is on my top 10 list because it's actually really important to know your techniques, to know slap bass and to know muting, but it's super funky. And DURAS with Future Nostalgia, the album from 2020, it's just loaded full of funk bass lines. It's definitely worth checking out, definitely worth learning. So I'm just going to play a very small snippet of that bass line because there are a few bass fills, a few variations, but I'm just going to play the main groove. So you've got to be super, super tight on your muting for this. So obviously check out my plucking hand and the rotation on the slap bass technique, and obviously the bass line sounds like this. So that is a song that's really, really kind of popular at the minute, and obviously for good reason. It's a really cool bass line. It's actually a really good album in general. So that was Levitating by DURAS. Check out the whole track. There's some nice tasty bass lines and bass fills all the way through it. That's just a very small snippet. That's the main groove at the start of the song, but it gives you enough to obviously whet your appetite to learn the rest of it. So really, really worth checking out. So number 3 is a song by THUNDERCAT, and this is obviously pure funk, really, really bouncy, really cool, and it's called DRAGONBALL DURAS. And it's a really, really cool song just in general. Really, really nice effects on the bass line as well in the original version. So check it out. It's got loads of cool stuff going on. And obviously if you don't know THUNDERCAT, he is a phenomenal bass player. So check out all of the other stuff he's ever done. It's just a very small snippet of that song. It's got a really, really nice grooving bounce to it. So obviously when I play it, just try and lock in, and when you listen to the original song, just hear how that bass line ticks along underneath everything, and it holds the whole song together, which is obviously why it's number 3 on my top 10 2020 bass lines. So because it's THUNDERCAT, it uses a lot of weird gaps. It's got a few mutes in there as well, and it just really, really bounces. It's all about locking into the groove because it is just pure funk. But obviously the bass on the original track has got loads of effects on it, so it sounds a little bit more modern as well. So check it out. That obviously was DRAGONBALL DURAS by THUNDERCAT, and that was number 3. Number 4 technically has kind of very similar rhythms. They're 16th notes, they're very fast, but it's a completely different style of music because it's more poppy and it's more kind of like sounding a bit more modern. Obviously they're both made in the same year, but this has a bit more of like a modern production to it, and it's BTS with Dynamite. So this is kind of like boy band territory, but it's a little bit more like modern boy band. The bass line is really cool. It's got loads of space in it, which makes the whole thing just tick along really nicely. And if you're not careful, you will rush it and you will play it wrong. So you've got to kind of just hold your breath, hold your groove, make sure it's correct. And that way it actually gives you some pretty decent technique to take from it as well. So this is Dynamite by BTS. So you can hear there's loads of space. It almost sounds like I've forgotten what I'm playing, but you've got to let the whole song breathe and then obviously carry on playing. And it's got some really, really fast 16th note stuff in it. Da, 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 da. So it's really, really funky, but obviously it's a bit more in a pop scene, and it's just a really cool bass line. Go and check out the original, and all of those spaces that I'm leaving will make a lot more sense. It's got a little bit of a cool muting technique in there as well. So at the very, very end, just before it loops, it does this. So there's actually 2 mutes before you play the first note. So it goes da 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 da, and it gives it that kind of like side bop, that kind of like swinging your head from back and forth, left to right. So just be careful of those mutes. Obviously use the PDF, use the tab, use the obviously the actual track to listen to it. It's a really, really cool bass line. So obviously that was number 4 on our list. So this is number 5, which is Take Me Dancing by Jason Derulo. So that has a really, really quick bounce to it, and it's got quite a lot of subtle technique going on. So the rhythm is really important. Da, 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 da. And it's got like really, really quick bass fills in there. So when you've got the da 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 da, and then that happens on the D note, which is the 5th fret of the A string, and it also happens on the A, which is the 5th note of the E string, then the bass line kind of starts to loop itself after you do this, and the rhythm is actually quite hard to lock in if you're not paying attention, because you've got the da 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 da. So what I mean by that is this bit. That 9 is longer than the 7, and sometimes it's really easy to cut them both really short. So you've got to make sure that you get the so if you think of it as long, short, da, da, and it's really, really fast going from the 7 to the 5 again. And what I mean by that is the 7 on the G string going back to the 5 on the A string. So if I play that just on a loop so you can see how fast it is, it basically goes like this. So it's really, really fast. And obviously you probably wouldn't expect it from Jason Derulo, but it's got a lot of bounce, and it really, really kind of makes that melody really catchy, makes it stand out, and it gives the whole track that dance vibe. And obviously the song is called Take Me Dancing, so it makes a lot of sense. So that was number 5 by Jason Derulo. And if you didn't realize it was Jason Derulo, he says his name at the very start of the song. Good one, Jason. So number 6, we're still keeping up with the kind of 16th note rhythms. And if you don't know what I mean by 16th note rhythms, it's just very fast. So we're still keeping up with that. And this is 3 on E by Wolfpack. And if you've ever heard anything by Wolfpack, you know that Joe Dart is an absolute monster on bass, so you know that what's about to come is really, really syncopated, really difficult bass lines. So what we're going to do is we're obviously going to play the bass line, and you've got the PDF to look at it. It's just all about subtle rhythm, 16th notes, and trying to make sure that your fingers can move fast enough to get the mutes that you really need to put in just before some of the notes. So what I mean by that is, obviously, if you look at the PDF, I'm going to play them, but obviously there are very quick mutes in between some of the notes, and if you don't put them in, it doesn't have the same bounce to it. So you definitely want to make sure that those are perfect. Joe Dart is an absolute monster at this whole kind of muting 16th note bass line stuff, hence why Wolfpack are just absolute funk machines. So this is 3 on E by Wolfpack, and obviously this is the bass line. So between the 7 and the 9, there's a mute. And then between the 9 and the 6, there's a mute. So the idea is you want to make sure that they're crystal clear, keeping the groove going, keeping the bounce going. The 9, 10, 11, sometimes you're going to play that wrong because it's actually slightly off the beat. So it goes da, 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 there's the beat, da, da, da. So ba, da, 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 da. So you've got to make sure that the actual beat and the kind of click of the metronome comes just before you play 9, 10, 11. So that is a pure Joe Dart bass line because he's playing just off the metronome, just off the click. Makes it pure funk, and it's really, really good. Makes it a little bit more complicated, and obviously that's what we're here to learn. So obviously that's why it's on my list, and that was 3 on E, and that was Wolfpack. Bass player is Joe Dart. Definitely go and check out some more Wolfpack stuff. Very, very cool, very, very tight. So we're on to number 7 now, and our 7th bass line from 2020 is Miley Cyrus, Midnight Sky. So obviously some people might not like Miley Cyrus, some people might think it's a pop song, but once again it actually has a pretty funky, pretty bouncy bass line, and that's why it's worth checking out and worth learning. Sometimes it doesn't have to be really, really complicated. It's all about the groove, and there's some nice little gaps that make this bass line super, super interesting, and obviously just make it really, really cool. So let's obviously check it out. So this is Midnight Sky by Miley Cyrus. So that is actually quite a cool bass line. It's very fast, it's got a lot of good groove and a good bounce to it, but there's quite a lot of cool stuff you can take away from it. So you've got octaves, which is always a good technique as a bass player to know, and you've also got chromatic walk-ups. So what I mean by that is when we play the 7 on the E string, we go 5, 6, 7. Da 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 da. And it's also got slides as well. So there are actually quite a lot of cool interwoven techniques into this bass line, which is why it's definitely worth checking out. That's just a snippet of the song though, so obviously the song does change the bass line going forward, but that is just one part of the song, and there is obviously more to learn from the original. So check out this obviously snapshot of the bass line, listen to the original, and obviously kind of benefit from the coolness that is Miley Cyrus. So this is number 8. This is Troubles Coming by Royal Blood. Heavier and slightly darker for 2020, but the bass guitar is almost the lead instrument in this. It's got loads of melody content. It's really cool, but it still sounds really heavy. So check this out. So this is a very small snapshot of the whole entire song. This is the bass line from the pre-chorus section. So this is where the bass line is more melodic than in other parts of the song. And it sounds like this. So da 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 da, that could be totally a melody if it was played on guitar, if it was played on piano, or if it was sung, but it's played on bass, soaked in distortion, and it sounds amazing. So you should definitely check out Royal Blood because it is very melodic bass playing, but it is still really heavy, and obviously it's a rock style band. And just to let you know again, that was Troubles Coming by Royal Blood. Use the PDF to learn that bass line. Listen to the rest of the song. It's really, really cool. So just to give you a heads up, for number 9 and number 10, I've got to change bass because I've got to play a 6-string bass for this. And the reason why is because the actual songs need the lower string. They need a B string for this. So if you have a 5-string or a 6-string, awesome. If you don't, then you're going to have to tune down your 4-string to a B. And the best thing is you can still learn how to play this from a 4-string bass, but a 4-string bass doesn't quite achieve the same consistency as obviously having a 5 or a 6-string. So I'm going to change bass, and just to give you a heads up, number 9 on our list is a band called Architects, and the song is called Animals. So this is number 9, this is Animals by Architects. I'll play that one more time because this bass line kind of ends on a final note, and the idea is that it's kind of hard to loop because it's not like a full-on looped section like the rest of the bass lines in this video. So that was once round. I'll play it again for you just so you can hear it again. And the idea is that you can use the PDF, look at the tab, and just lock in with the rhythm. Because it's more modern metal, then the idea is that it's kind of slightly more syncopated, which means the rhythms are a little bit more broken. They're a little bit harder to match up with the metronome, but it sounds really cool. And obviously you need the low string because you're playing the 2nd fret of a B string, or just in case you want to know the actual note you're playing, it is C sharp. So if you can get a C sharp from your string, you're good to go. And obviously it's because it's down tuned. So that's why I'm playing a 6th string. So just because obviously it's a little bit more heavy, modern metal, there's loads of rhythmical stuff you can take away from that. Rhythm is such an important part of modern metal songs, so it's definitely worth checking out even if you're not into the heavier style of music. So that was Architects, and the song was called Animals. So the bass line throughout the whole song is really cool. It's got a lot of aggression and distortion, but the rhythms are really cool to study. So check out the whole song, and obviously use this little segment to give you the motivation to check the rest of the song out. Number 10 then, so this is the grand final top 10 2020 bass line. The reason why I've picked this one is because it's absolutely insane. It's so technical, so hard, really, really fast. It is one of the hardest bass lines I think that has come out in 2020. And it's from a band called Intervals, and the song is called VANTABLACK. And there's a bass break, which means the bass just plays all on its own, and it's slapped double thumbed, and it's really, really hard to play. The bass player, Jacob Umansky, is just an absolute demon. So if you're interested in progressive instrumental music, or if you're interested in just really hard technical bass lines, go and check out Intervals. Go and check out Jacob Umansky. It's really, really cool. I'm just gonna play the bass break for the song, but the bass line throughout the whole entire song is crazy. So this is VANTABLACK by Intervals. This isn't in standard tuning, so the B and the E string need to be tuned down to an A and a D. And this bass line actually uses all 6 strings of a 6-string bass. So even though it's my top 10 bass line of 2020, I know some of you might not be able to play it, but just listen to it, check it out, it's absolutely nuts. So if you do have a 6-string bass, you're playing a standard tuned 6-string, the B string is down to an A, and the E string is down to a D, and this is how you play the bass line. So, as you might be able to tell, that's a lot of concentration. That's just once. That is the smallest snippet of the bass line ever as well. The whole entire bass line is literally like that. It's one of the coolest things ever, but also one of the hardest things to play, probably from 2020. There's loads of other hard bass lines as well, but the techniques involved are just like astronomical. So you've got slap, you've got pops, you've got double thumbing, slides, you've got to cover a lot of distance in no time at all as well. So that is my top 2020 bass lines. They've all got different reasons why they're on that list. Some of them are simple but catchy. Some of them have really cool techniques. Some of them are just to introduce you to heavier music and to introduce you into different types of bass lines. And then obviously the last one, which is VANTABLACK by Intervals, is basically just to show you that some people can play insane bass lines, and you might not know the band because they're not super mainstream, but the idea is that if you go and dig hard enough, you will find some really, really cool stuff that you can learn. So use that PDF below to learn the snapshots of the bass lines that I've played in this video. Drop me your top 10 2020 bass lines in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. And obviously I'll see you again very soon for the top 10 2021 bass lines. So go practice some bass, go learn these cool songs, and I'll see you again next time.